Hello again, everyone. Continuing with Detroit Week, I'm going to be looking at the Lions of the NFL. So last year, the Lions had an 11-5 record, so pretty respectable, pretty impressive record for sure, right there. Their division, when you have the Packers in your division, you're going to have to be a pretty competitive team, and they were making the playoffs. So that's a good result for the Lions for sure. Why they were so successful relies heavily on their defense. Defense was third in the league in points. They only give 17.6 points per game, and first against the rush. They were giving up less than 70 yards on the ground last year on average per game, which is really good. And they were second in the league. They were only giving up 300.9 yards total per game. So they were 13th in the pass at 231.6. But overall, in three of the four big categories, they're in the top three, if not leading in the category. So that's solid. Their offense, obviously, when you have a defense that's stellar like that, you don't have to have an offense that's in the top 10 in a lot of categories. But their offense was respectable. 22nd in the points category, 20.1 points per game for the offense. So most teams, if you're only scoring 20 points a game, you're probably not going to win that many. But when your defense is only giving up 17.6, you're going to have a solid record at 11-5 at the end of the season or something like that, which is what they did. 19th in total yards, 340.8 yards. 12th in the pass at 251.9. They were 28th in the rush at just 88.9, so about 90 yards per game on the ground. But when you have Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson as your receivers, you are going to have a pass-heavy offense. And it's not that Bell didn't get touches and didn't produce on the ground. He had 223 attempts for 860 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. And Bell also contributed with 34 receptions for another 300-plus yards. So, again, you're going to have a pass-heavy offense when you have Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate as your receivers. Looking at other teams like the Texans, for example, when they told Andre Johnson he's not going to get a lot of touches, obviously he's going to go somewhere else where he can't get touches. You don't have players like that and not getting the ball at least 8 to 10 times a game. So when you have Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson, two guys who had 1,000-plus receiving yard seasons, Golden Tate had 99 receptions for 1,331 yards. Calvin Johnson had 71 receptions for 1,077 yards. Combined, they had 12 touchdowns. So you got two receivers that can have 1,000-plus yard seasons, especially if Matt Stafford can find a way to get them the ball, which he did. 363 on 602 pass attempts, so he is passing the ball a lot, which is fine. When you have those targets, you're going to want him to be throwing the ball a lot. It might be nice to have a running back who maybe gets another 5 or so touches a game, just keep the defense a little more on edge. But again, when you got Golden Tate and Calvin Johnson, defenses are going to expect you to be a pass-heavy offense, but those guys have the talent and the skills to make the catches in order for Stafford to be able to throw it 35 to 40 times a game. That's not going to be an issue. He had 22 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, so that's solid right there. 2-to-1 ratio, touchdown to interception is solid for any starting quarterback in the league, and he had over 4,000 passing yards, so that's good there as well. He was sacked 45 times, however, so I think their offensive line is something that they're going to look to improve this upcoming season, whether that be through the draft or through free agency, or we'll see what they do with that. But when he's on his butt 45 times over the course of the season, that's almost 3 times a game. That's a lot for him to be on for him to be sacked, especially when you want him to be getting the ball out and getting it to the receivers. Quarterbacks need time to find the open receiver to get the ball downfield. So you can do the quick slants and you can do the hitch passes to your running back and stuff and get the ball quickly that way. But to get down the field, you're going to want to have those 4 or 5 times a game where you get the 20-plus yard pass. But you got to be able to give Tate and Johnson, your other receivers, time to get down the field, and that's where the offensive line has to be able to keep the defensive linemen and the linebackers and cornerbacks who are rushing in from the edges, kind of thing, away from Stafford. So hopefully they'll find a way to improve on their offensive line this upcoming season so that he can get the ball to Johnson and Tate more often, more efficiently, and have a better impact on the team for sure. Looking at their defense, their middle linebacker Tulloch, as well as their defensive tackle Fairley, were out for good portions of the season. Fairley only played half the season. Tulloch, I think, only got like 2 games in before he was out for the season. So you still had those amazing stats that I mentioned before where they stood against other teams in the league without Fairley, without Tulloch, so without 2 solid producers and guys on your defense. Ansah, their defensive end, young guy they got there, 49 combined tackles and 7.5 sacks, so that's solid there. Looking at their other guy on the line, obviously, Suh. What's going to happen with him? A lot of the rumors are swirling that he's going to be going to the Dolphins. which I could see happening. He's going to go where he can get paid. So we'll see what happens with that. He had 53 combined tackles and 8.5 sacks last year, so he'd be a tough guy to lose. Obviously, a lot of people feel Suh is the kind of player that you can build a defense around, so Miami might be looking to do that if he signs with them, but we'll see what happens. Detroit might be able to convince him to stay. Because he is a great guy to have for sure. Looking at other players, their outside linebacker Levy last year, 151 combined tackles, so he was getting in a lot of plays, which is great. 2.5 sacks and 4 pass deflections for him, so that's solid. And then they also had their middle linebacker Whitehead, who had 86 combined tackles with 5 pass deflections and 2 interceptions. So even your linebackers are getting into the pass deflection role, which is good. You don't necessarily need to have linebackers who are great pass rushers if you have guys like Suh and Ansah on the line who are getting 7+ sacks a season. That's solid. You don't need to have linebackers who can rush the passer. It's great to have that as well. With Levy having 2.5 sacks, if you can find linebackers that can get to the quarterback, that's a bonus. But it's not necessarily a need for the team when you have those two guys in Ansah and Suh who were combined had 15 sacks in the course of the season. So again, we'll see what happens with Suh. If he stays, they don't have to worry about that. If he does leave, they do have, I want to say, the 23rd overall pick, if I've done my math correctly, this upcoming year. So there defensive ends and defensive linemen. There are tons available in the draft that you can probably pick up late in the first round. I'm in my mock draft. I have them looking at probably taking maybe Arik Armstead, who nobody has in any mock draft that I've been looking at before. This was a couple weeks ago. I didn't see Armstead in any, but after his performance at the Combine, I think he would be a solid late first round pick, which is where the Lions would sit. So if Suh leaves, you might be looking at drafting Armstead. They're also going to be looking at free agency, and is there another defensive lineman we could pick up? Well, they'll have to look and see about that, because Suh is, again, not somebody you can easily replace. You're not going to draft a guy in the first round and expect him to replace Suh. But you're going to want to make sure you draft somebody that can make an impact. So whether it is a defensive lineman or an offensive lineman to help decrease the number of sacks that you had, giving up 45 last year, we'll have to see what happens with that. But again, free agency is still going to be going wild for the next 6 weeks before the draft happens. So the Lions might be able to fill in some of their gaps and some of their needs through free agency before they get to the draft. But we'll look and see what happens. Like I said, I think Arik Armstead would be a solid late first round pick for them to grab if he was available. Looking at their backfield, so their cornerbacks and free safeties and strong safeties and stuff like that. The four I'm primarily going to look at is Slay, Mathis, Digbo, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Quinn. When you look at those four guys combined, they have 13 interceptions and 256 combined tackles. So, your defensive backfield is getting involved. Those four guys averaged almost a pick a game. They also had 44 total pass deflections amongst them. So, those guys are averaging almost a pick a game and 3 pass deflections a game. And sometimes a pass deflection is just as good as a pick, especially if it's on a 3rd and long kind of thing. Well, now you're getting the ball back anyway, so that's great. So if you can't get the interception, you want to break it to play somehow, and whether that be through a pass deflection or whatever other way you can to break up the play, then that's great. That's really good to have for sure. Slay, looking at him specifically, 61 combined tackles, 17 pass deflections, and 2 picks. So he's breaking up 1 pass a game. Now, whether or not that pass is just a simple 6-yard, pass to a running back out of the backfield, or whether it's a 30-yard deep pass, it doesn't matter. Breaking up a pass is great. Whatever kind of yards you're stopping the offense from getting, it's a good thing to have, and he's getting 1 of those a game, so that's pretty solid there. The other cornerback, Mathis, 71 combined tackles, 8 pass deflections, 4 picks, and he also had 2 sacks, so he's even getting to the quarterback kind of thing, which is solid. You can afford to do that. You get your cornerback into the quarterback and have some sack opportunities when you have a solid backfield like they have. Digbo had 71 combined tackles, 8 pass deflections, 4 picks, and 2 sacks were for Digbo. I apologize. Mathis, sorry, I apologize for those stats mix up. He had 51 combined tackles and 9 pass deflections. So again, another great guy. Not to disregard his stats at all by flipping those. I apologize for that. And then lastly, your free safety, Quinn, 73 combined tackles, 10 pass deflections, and 7 picks. So your backfield is great. I know a lot of people talk about the Detroit Lions, Suh being their face of the defensive side of the ball for sure, and they're having a great defensive line and all that kind of stuff. And I think the backfield, their defensive backs kind of kind of get lost in the shuffle, with Sue being the one everybody's going to talk about. But with the stats I just said, as those four guys combined, over 250 combined tackles, 44 pass deflections, 13 picks, your defensive backs are producing for you as well, and that's why your defense was so well. You're 13th against the pass, so you're top half of the league against the pass, which is solid, which is great. Especially if your team is first in against the rush. Teams aren't going to run the ball against you because they know they're not going to have success with that, so they're going to be throwing the ball a lot more. So your defensive backs are going to be expecting to get a lot of action and make a lot of impact plays and get involved with the ball a lot because teams are going to be throwing against you and they're not going to run it. So being in the top half of the league for that is great because they were getting a lot of balls thrown to them, which again is probably why they had 44 pass deflections and 13 combined picks amongst those guys, is because the ball was in the air a lot, so they had an opportunity to make a lot of plays on the ball. So that's solid right there. So good luck to the Lions in this upcoming season. We'll see what happens with Sue, because I think whatever decision he makes will have an impact on the rest of the free agency with what they do, with the Lions do for free agency. It'll make an impact with what their draft is going to be, what they do with their pick. If Sue leaves, I would strongly expect it to be a defensive lineman that they draft with the 23rd overall pick. Like I said, I think Armstead would be a solid pick right there if he's available. But we'll see what happens. Sue might stay, and then you could go and draft maybe a young running back to complement Bell to make your offense a little more two-dimensional. Maybe you go and draft a linebacker or something who could be a pass rusher as well. As another element, you like I said with Sue and Ansah, you have two guys who are averaging 16 combined sacks this past year. So you don't necessarily need a pass rusher, but it would be nice to have another guy who can come from the linebacker spot and make impacts on the quarterback for sure. So we'll see what happens. Or they could also, like I said, draft an offensive lineman to try to decrease the amount of sacks that Stafford was getting this past season with 45. So he almost got 3 sacks a game. So they might be drafting an offensive lineman as well. So probably a guy in the trenches. If Sue stays, offensive lineman. If he leaves, defensive lineman. That's kind of, I think, the bread and butter right there is how it would work. It's a pretty black and white situation to talk about it that way and divulge it in that way, but I think that's just the way it works for the Lions. You had an 11-5 record last year, so you have success. You got the receivers, you got the quarterback who can make the plays and give you the offense to win the games. You just got to make sure your defense can keep the pace that they had last year and make some impacts. So good luck to the Lions this upcoming NFL season, and I will be continuing Detroit Week tomorrow with a look at the Detroit Pistons of the NBA. Thanks again for watching, and again, you can follow me on Twitter at GHAM614.